Welcome to GAEL Unscripted, where leadership meets learning and real conversations drive real impact. I'm Ben Wiggins, Executive Director of GAEL. Join us as we go beyond the headlines with Georgia's top education leaders. Let's elevate the conversation. Welcome back, GAEL family, to another exciting episode of GAEL Unscripted. Today we have an exciting show for you with a special guest, Monican Batiste. Monica, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Good afternoon. I'm Monican Batiste, and I am a recent retiree. I retired 3 years ago, worked in education for 32 years. 26 of those years were spent in Gwinnett. And during my tenure as an educator, I taught both second and fourth grade and worked as administrators in schools as well as data administrators, focused solely on school improvement for data. And from the data administrator position, I moved into a principal role, and I spent the last 16 years of my career in human resources.
Wow, so you got the teacher experience, you went to the school level experience as a principal, and then you went to the other side at the district office, right? Talk about that change a little bit. What you learned from that, what was unique about it?
The most unique thing about the transition from the local school to central office was not having that collaboration with a specific group. I noted that central office has a different set of rules and standards, and the thing I missed the most was the students. And so I quickly learned how to switch my support from community and staff to the staff body at large. I had the privilege of working in Gwinnett County, as I said, for 26 years. Largest school district in the state of Georgia, a little bit over 24,000 employees, and about 186,000 students at the time that I was there.
Bigger than a lot of states. Well, I'll say a lot of states, than a number of states. So it is unbelievable, and I know that for years, many of us have always looked at Gwinnett as a model. Been extremely impressed with the structure and the processes that you all have in place. Loved hearing anytime there was someone from Gwinnett presenting at a conference. I just felt like even working at small districts, you all offered so much insight into the structure and process that we could take back to smaller districts to try to replicate.
Yes.
But 24,000 employees. And for our listeners and watchers, you heard Monica say her last 16 years she was over in the HR department. And how many of those years toward the end were you over? You were the associate superintendent over human resources, and I think y'all were the first district I saw that had talent management. I remember seeing that and not ever seeing that before.
Yes. So my last 2 years prior to retiring, I spent as the associate superintendent of human resources during the pandemic. So that shift that you're talking about from human resources to talent management occurred under Dr. Davis, who was one of the longest standing associate superintendents. And she was really intentional about moving us from a personnel department to a department that worked on a holistic HR approach, ranging from that professional development piece, of course, anchored in recruitment and retention. And so we had a lot of staff development that mingled along with the work that we learned through Wallace, as well as NYCLA, the New York Leadership Principal Academy. And so we married those curriculum and instruction aspects with our human resource and talent management strategies, and it just really helped us with recruitment, particularly during the pandemic.
Yeah. And I know as your leaders in Gwinnett County, y'all had an excellent reputation of developing your leaders from within.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about that. I know that was one of the many things under your umbrella, but that leadership development and how important that was at Gwinnett County.
So Gwinnett County really had a way of ensuring that we grew our talent within the district, starting from our students who graduated from high school through the teacher development programs all the way through the leadership programs in Gwinnett. So a lot of people talk about Gwinnett having a lot of processes and procedures. Part of the processes and procedures was necessary, being a large school district, to ensure that we were all on the same page. And one of the things that we were fortunate to do through our leadership development program was make sure that the information was layered from cabinet with our superintendent to our leadership development one team, which is everyone that served in a director role and above. The second tier of leadership development was for our leadership development two, and that's our assistant principals and coordinators. One of the things that we did, I believe, really well in Gwinnett was had a leadership academy for aspiring leaders that were able to hear that same information as well as meet with division leads. And so we had the Aspiring Principal Academy as well as the Aspiring Assistant Principal Academy. Towards the end of my career, we also had a district leader program that Gwinnett is still working upon building for anyone who moved to the district office in a central office position that was not school-based, and they're building upon that as well. So there were a number of opportunities to align that communication from our superintendent, aligned with our strategic priorities and initiatives, all the way to everyone throughout the local school.
Yeah, that's impressive. And Gwinnett was leading the way years ago when many districts were not, about growing your own leaders and developing those leaders in your pipeline, and it paid off dividends because by and large, Gwinnett hires their principals from within. They've developed them. It's kind of like Chick-fil-A. You've brought them in, you've taught them the Gwinnett way, but very, very impressive.
Yes. Prior to my retirement, we started looking at outside talent, and Gwinnett has definitely increased the number of outside talent to increase our diversity pipeline within our communication. And when I left, we had increased our outside pipeline hiring to about 25%.
Yeah, and I think that's good. It brings in fresh ideas from outside, whether it's neighboring districts or different states. And I think that keeps everything fresh. Let's talk about your HR staff when you were there, with the entire human resources and talent management under your umbrella. You had not only directors, you had executive directors, you had an assistant superintendent, all up under your umbrella. You know, when I look at that and I look at pictures of your staff from back then, the first thing that pops into my mind is, how did you organize the structure to make sure that all the proper steps were in line and no one was jumping out of line or getting out of context? How did you go about developing that structure?
So we had three big buckets in terms of organizing staff. We had the human resources talent management, which focused on recruitment and retention, and that was our staffing development department, our staffing department. And the second umbrella that we had was our compensation and our benefits, because of course we believe that our people are our greatest resources, and that recruitment starts with compensation, benefits, and salary. And then the third team that we had under human resources, a big bucket, was our internal resolutions department. A little bit different because we wanted to make sure that when we were working with internal investigations as a staffing department, that we were not crossing over and showing bias if we met someone twice. And so that was our umbrella that ensured that we were compliant as well as fair towards all of our employees.
Very, very impressive. Let's talk about the school staffing and the support staffing. How did you go about that at Gwinnett? You're so large. I know you have area superintendents that kind of have clusters. So when it comes to hiring season, what did that look like for Gwinnett County?
As you said, our staffing alignment was with our cluster superintendents. So our school improvement and operations team led the way, and we supported our school improvement and operations teams from a staffing perspective regarding who we supported. As a director, I've worked both as a level staffing director as well as a cluster staffing director. And so I started my career as an elementary staffing director, and as our school improvement structure changed, I had the privilege of supporting elementary, middle, and high through the cluster leadership supporting structure. And so on average, each staffing director, whether we were supporting from a level perspective or a cluster perspective, had 26 schools. And of course, the smallest school in Gwinnett is about 800 students. Largest about 35 or 2,500 students. So we supported a large number of schools through all of their staffing needs. So that was their recruitment, their retention, hiring of certified, classified staff, any other employee relations support that they needed, conflict resolution, as well as information with with staff who needed additional support. I did not mention leadership development. Leadership development is also under that umbrella, and that's where all of our leadership development, ranging from teachers desiring to become leaders to our principals moving into district leadership roles.
Yeah. When I looked at all of the different things under your umbrella, I couldn't figure out anything that had been left out. It, like you had everything covered that came under your umbrella and your leadership. Very, very impressive. Working in HR and eventually leading HR, how important do you think it was that you served both in the classroom as a teacher and at the school level as a principal? How beneficial did you see that experience in your role when you were leading the department?
It was quite beneficial. Gwinnett was one of those only school districts at the time that I worked in HR that hired school leaders or school principals into the director role. And because Gwinnett is so large and our HR department serves so many complex roles, it was really beneficial to understand local school leadership as well as district level leadership. Meaning we, as leaders, had to understand the local school plan for improvement and how the local school plan for improvement impacted hiring. If you were working with the Title I school, we were looking for a different type of teacher to support student needs. So understanding the principal's leadership goals and objectives really helped to build a relationship and support principals. And so having been in Gwinnett so long and served as a principal, it also gave me an opportunity to hear what's going on whenever there's friction, because there was trust and a professional development, a professional relationship. Many principals would call and say, hey, have you heard about this? And we, because a lot of us grew under our leadership development academies together, we were trained to not only offer or suggest a problem, but offer a solution. So I really believe that that helped to solidify those relationships from human resources to the local school.
That's great. So you got the school level reaching out to HR for information, help, assistance, and sometimes you hear the exact opposite of that, where the school level leadership may be a little reluctant to reach out to the HR. And I think that goes back to your point of how Gwinnett developed their own leaders, and you had that pipeline. Everyone knew, you had the trust, you had this historical knowledge. I know for people coming into HR sometimes from outside, they have all the HR knowledge,
Yes.
but they lack the school knowledge. And is the exact opposite for those that maybe come from the principal level to HR, but they have to learn all the HR. So it's a difficult journey for anyone, but Gwinnett has really figured that out. Let's talk about recruitment and retention. That's really gotten the attention of even our legislators under the Gold Dome now. The Senate Education Committee led by Senator Billy Hickman, they came out with Senate Resolution 237, where they basically charged Dr. Jody Barrow, the PSC, to work with the University System of Georgia, the Technical College System of Georgia, TRS, Page, GAEL, GSSA, all of these different entities to come up with a plan. And you mentioned a few of the things that you did there in Gwinnett, but elaborate on that a little bit. I know one of the things Gwinnett has been famous for is as outsiders refer to it as the Gwinnett retirement system, which is really good. But talk about some of those things that you've y'all tried to offer?
So we always highlighted our hidden paycheck. Because, of course, when you think about that benefits package, especially thinking about that teacher Gwinnett retirement system that's different than any other, early towards our career, we used that as a major recruiting strategy. And so towards the end of my career, our teacher candidates entering Gwinnett was looking for something different. We noted that many of our candidates that were entering Gwinnett towards the end of my career in 2022 were not looking for that retirement piece. So when the state actually looked at those recruitment and retention efforts, we realized that there was a gap, and not only a gap in generations, but a gap in knowledge. So we hired a recruitment and retention coordinator to help with those efforts. She was part of that team with the state, and she came in with that knowledge. And one of the things that she did in terms of recruitment that was different than anything that we did before was she formed a relationship with new teachers and developed a cohort to make sure that they were receiving the support that they needed. And a lot of the support that they desired was being heard and seen in the workplace. A little bit different than what we had prior to 2022. So she worked really hard at developing relationships with teachers and meeting those recruitment needs. So we added that particular measure to all of the other recruitment and retention incentives. We also worked hard to ensure that we had a lack of special education teachers. So we offered a number of stipends through the district to support any parapros seeking a teaching position, as well as student teachers who were in the education field that may want to teach special ed. So we offered a number of stipends and internships early on to support those critical areas.
That's awesome. So our listeners and watchers back at your home district, you're hearing some things that Gwinnett had started earlier, and you're hearing of more and more school districts doing that, but really taking care of those new teachers, understanding that it's a new generation and they're looking at different things, they're motivated by different things, but you're taking care of those cohort of new teachers to find out what they need and what they want. I think that's a big key there. You mentioned internal resolution. I cannot imagine that out of 24,000 employees you ever needed any internal resolution, but talk about that a little bit.
So our internal resolutions department, of course, upheld the policies and procedures within the code of ethics, of course. And so we had internal resolution investigations ranging from, of course, employee misconduct to sometimes conflict resolution. Of course, there are times when you just need a neutral party to sit in and hear from a different perspective, ensuring that we do follow all federal, local, and national policies. So the internal resolutions department was a bit different than staffing because it was hinged, of course, on internal investigations as well as supporting students in investigations as well. And so our staffing department still helped with some internal investigations that was specific to professional development and providing help with principals with teachers or staff members needing support with professional development plans. So we tried to make sure that those two were different, and that if there was an internal resolution matter that was different than the professional development pieces, that the staffing directors did not meet with them so that no one thought it was retaliatory in nature. So we separated the two and made sure that all of our employee investigation needs were met through that structure.
Because sometimes at the school level, as an assistant principal or a principal, sometimes we just get a little too close to the situation, and we may, prior knowledge or our emotions may cloud us a little bit. And I think it's important to have that unbiased person at the district office able to sit down and truly come up with the right steps and resolution.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And one thing we offer at GAEL, Cindy Flesher is our expert on that, is the crucial conversations training. I know that's one thing that a lot of new leaders really struggle in is documentation.
Yes.
A lot of them want to be liked. They want to They don't want to have those hard, difficult conversations and do it in a professional manner.
Yes.
And so talk about that just a little bit, how important it is maybe for the building level principals to stay in contact with HR at the district office when they are having issues with employees, rather than coming up to human resources and say, hey, I'm ready to make a change here. And usually get the question, well, where's the documentation? Show me what you've done so far. But talk a little bit about that.
I'm glad you asked that question because I think the anchor in what we do in HR is broker trust. Because you have to be trustworthy in a position for someone to, both from a leadership perspective as well as a staff perspective, to trust you. And so when I think about that, we always made sure that at least 3 times a year that we were having, from a director perspective, a conversation with principals about employee concerns. We call it a hatchet job, and we want to make sure that we have a fair due process procedure. And in order to do that, because principals are juggling so many hats, we made sure that we inserted y'all come opportunities for staff development. We also had an HR timeline where we made sure that if you were having problems with an employee, that you contacted or reached your staffing director prior to certain dates so that it's not a surprise. And we know, as you said, that employee documentation and crucial conversation is very difficult when principals are juggling all of these other balls in the air. And we know that those conversations typically start in the office, and before the principal goes home at the end of the day, the narrative is shared throughout the schools. So we made sure that throughout the year that not only did we provide that professional development, but that we had check-ins, especially if a principal had a number of new staff members, or if something new was going on in a school, we made sure that we had those check-in calls so that we could avoid that. I mean, I sat in the principal seat, and I know how uncomfortable it is to have those critical conversations. So keeping in mind, we made sure that we built those opportunities to talk about that during our year, and principals were privy to that HR timeline calendar to know those crucial times. In December, when students are ready to go home and teachers are ready to go home, we made sure that that was a time that we had those conversations. Right when everyone returned in January, unfortunately, that's when we had a number of DUIs and a couple of things that occurred during the break. So we made sure that we had a touch point there. And then in March, that was when we really started talking about what that employee documentation looked like if we were going to consider non-renewal.
Yeah, I love that. I love the timeline piece. So maybe if you're a new HR professional and you're listening to this podcast, maybe that's one takeaway you take from it is, does your district have a timeline calendar similar to what Monica is talking about to help your principals think about that and ensure they have the documentation? Great points there. I saw that you were also up for Title IX, and so talk about that and some of the challenges and increases that you probably saw with some issues in Title IX over the years.
And so our Title IX was under our internal resolutions. And similar to what I just said about staffing, we made sure that the training was available. We always had our beginning of the year Title IX training. And if there was a school in the past year that had an increase in Title IX incidents, we made sure that they were on our do call list. And so whether it was in our Leadership Development 1, which is where our superintendent met with our directors, anyone at the director level and above, we made sure that we were intentional about sharing that information, and of course that we followed all of the timelines. So that communication on the front end made a difference. And to say we're a large district, we really didn't have that many, and I believe our Title IX incidents, and I believe that part of it was because of our touch points throughout the year.
Yeah. I would agree. Training and touch points, huge, huge. At this time, we're going to talk about one of our partners, and Engage to Learn has been a partner of GAEL's. They've done a fantastic job, and one of the things that Engage to Learn has done as a part of their partnership with GAEL is they have provided the training and the platform for the executive coaching. And Monica, you are a GAEL executive coach, so maybe you could just elaborate real quickly on your training that you've gotten from Engage to Learn and maybe what you enjoyed about it.
So I was one of the inaugural coaches, and at the beginning of our journey, we received training for Engage to Learn. One of the things that I really love about working with Engage to Learn is when we ask for feedback, they are very prompt, precise, and there's always immediate feedback, whether it's through the chat or we have weekly meetings where we're able to work with Engage to Learn. If, as coaches, we were not able to attend the meeting, we could go back and listen to the recording. So I'd like to just really thank Corinza as well as Dr. Edmonds for the support that they provided. When we said that we needed something, they quickly went back to Engage to Learn, and they've improved platform features as a result of the requests that we've had. So the training is very robust, and of course we use the Georgia Leads tool as our repository to look at our goals for our clients in GAEL. So it's been a really wonderful ongoing relationship, very responsive, very professional, and always continuously meeting the needs of the executive coaches.
Perfect. So if you're a district out there and you'd like some more information, maybe you'd even like to train your own people in-house, Engage to Learn would be a fantastic company to reach out to. Monica, let's talk a little bit about work-life balance. A lot of leaders, it's a hot topic, but maybe share with us what you were really good at when it came to work-life balance, and maybe you, like me, maybe you struggled in some areas with that.
I think I failed at retirement and I failed at work-life balance. It's so funny. When you're working, the work has to be done, and working in a large district, especially being the only person responsible for something, we made sure that it was done. One of my clients last year asked me about work-life balance, and we worked on some things together to work through that. But earlier we were talking about that retirement piece and how you just halt as soon as I retired July of 2022. And that little feeling of emptiness that I felt for a couple of months when my phone didn't ring, it was a funny feeling.
That's a great point. You know, we've probably got a lot of listeners that are, you know, within 3 to 5 years of retirement, or maybe they already know this year they're going to retire. And I think you bring up an excellent point where, as leaders, we live at this frenetic pace where our phone doesn't stop. Our 8-hour day easily becomes 15, 16-hour days, weekends, and we're just on call all the time, or so it seems.
Yes.
And I think that's probably one thing we don't talk to leaders about enough is that transition from working full-time to retirement. Like you said, I mean, it's, not to over dramatically state it, but it is a little bit depressing to go from, hey, your phone's ringing all the time, they need you, to
Yes.
nothing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of my former mentors recommended a book entitled From Strength to Strength.
I've read that book. I read it this fall.
Was it not meaningful?
It was awesome.
Oh my gosh. And just to highlight a couple of things, it talks about our career. At the beginning of our career, how we have more capacity to learn, and how we move from that learner capacity to leader. And then towards the end of our career, we get to share our expertise with new people in
Which is what you're doing
the
now.
profession. So that was really impactful.
I shared that book with another person that had recently retired, and I said, I wish I would have read this book a year or two before retirement.
Yes.
So it's From Strength to Strength. I cannot remember the author of it right now, but my wife and I, we went through a small group, and we actually read that book together, and we both commented on how we wish we would have had access to that book before.
Absolutely. But it did kind of help me to shift in that moment when my phone wasn't ringing to, okay, I could add meaning and value in a different way now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Look at there. GAEL Unscripted. We did not even talk about that. Let's talk about a little bit, maybe some advice. So as we're getting down to about 5 more minutes on this podcast, let's talk about if I'm a new principal or a new superintendent, it's my first through third year, what advice would you have for them when it comes to communicating with the Human Resources Department?
Reach out as quickly and often as possible. Know the people in the Human Resources Department by name. I'd say that if you're a new principal and you're our new superintendent and your district does not have set systems and structures in place, ask for training on conflict resolution. Most human resources departments have training for classified as well as certified staff. As soon as possible, make sure that you ask for training on employee documentation as well as professional development. And most people look at human resources as a compliance division. There are so many more things that the HR team can help with during the school year. Some of the things that new principals often experience is leave. We may have 1 or 2 people that push that little leave policy right to that limit. You have to know what's involved. You have to know what you can say to an employee that has excessive leave as opposed to what you shouldn't say in an effort to make sure that you're compliant. So your HR person is your greatest supporter, and HR team members typically do a lot of cold call as well as just practice conversations. And if it's a conversation that's too hard, don't be afraid to ask HR, who's trained in that conflict resolution, to have that conversation with you on your behalf or for you on your behalf.
Great advice, and I would say sooner rather than later. I worked for our assistant superintendent over HR in Oconee County was Brooke Whitmire, and he had a little famous saying, and he came from Gwinnett, probably where he learned it all, but his little saying was, get central office in the boat with you early. And anyway, I copied that and took that with me at some later stops, but I think that's a incredibly important point you bring up. You know, HR handles all of the employees, which makes up, for most school districts, 85% of your cost, of your budget. So it should be a highly resourceful division in your school district and relied upon heavily, because you want to retain the ones that you've got. You don't want that constant turnover. All right, one more piece of advice before we call it a day on this podcast. I'm a brand new HR professional. I've just started. It's my first year. What would you recommend I be working on or thinking about right now?
Definitely recommend GASPA, getting connected as soon as possible. Within HR's support throughout the system, there are job-alike trainings that are offered through GASPA. Get connected as soon as possible. Even if it's something that's not in your wheelhouse, HR is so complex. There are things that you may have to do later on. Develop relationships as quickly as possible. Attend GAEL sessions as well as SHRM conferences, national as well as state conferences, to make sure that you're up to date. HR has a wealth of knowledge and support throughout the state. When you get that list of job-alikes in GASPA, use it. I've never called anybody that's not been able and desiring to help. I may have asked for one thing and receive 5 additional documents and then a check-in call to see how I'm doing. Utilize those networks and start your professional learning opportunities as soon as possible. And as you're supporting schools, make sure you meet with the principals that you support as soon as possible. Make sure that that's on your first 90-day plan, to meet with those people that you support so that you know what's going on and how you could best support them.
Perfect. That's great advice. GASPA does a fantastic job. Stephanie Dobbins is the executive director of GASPA. And like you said, they have job-alikes, they have monthly meetings, virtual. And what I found, not only with GASPA and HR professionals, but in every GAEL association and affiliate, is if you will call and ask for help, people are willing to bend over backwards to help you.
Absolutely. Yes.
So if you're a new HR professional, and even if you don't feel like you have some of the forms or some of the handbooks, I promise you there are great school districts out there that already have it, is vetted, is tight, is lawyer approved,
Yes.
and they will share that with you.
Absolutely.
Well, Monica, thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of GAEL Unscripted.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.